All right, if we're all ready, get started. Thank you everybody for attending today. Good afternoon and welcome to our panel session, Secure and Open, Not Mutually Exclusive. My name is Michael DuBois and I'll be your host for the panel session this afternoon. And with the help of this very impressive, distinguished panel of mainframe experts, we'd like to explore for you today some very important security topics, specifically around the intersection of open source technology and the mainframe platform. So why do we want to do that? So some of my colleagues and I who attend mainframe technical conferences like SHARE, for example, on a regular basis, we've noticed recently as open source technologies specifically designed for mainframe have become, like Zowe, like Open Mainframe Project Zowe, have become more and more prevalent, more popular, and more relevant. We've noticed a lot of questions coming from participants or the audience in those sessions, questions about the security of open source, especially as it applies to the mainframe platform. And while I think that those questions are generally answered with good confidence and accurately, I feel like it's probably true that the responses to those questions don't necessarily do enough to eliminate the concern that generated the question to begin with. A little bit of skepticism, I think, still. And a lot of our customers we find to be have some trepidation about open source on mainframe. So we thought, what better way to address this than to put together a panel of very experienced people with decades of experience in not only mainframe, but also security and open source technologies and other platforms as they interact with the mainframe. And maybe just throw some of these questions out and start some dialogue, and maybe we can, through that exploration, put some people's minds at ease about the whole idea of open source and mainframe. So that's the theory, that's our hypothesis, and this is the testing ground, so you guys are the guinea pigs. But again, what better place to test a theory like this than in a room filled with people from the financial industry. So I'll tell you a little bit more about myself, and then we'll get to meet the panel, and we'll get started. Like I said, my name is Michael DuBois. In my current role at Broadcom, I lead the product management organization for our open mainframe team. The open mainframe team does exactly what it sounds like we do. It's the best job in all of Broadcom. It's the best team in all of Broadcom. Every day we get to come to work and we get to play with and learn about and explore and work with exciting new open technologies that are designed to change the way next-gen engineers are interacting with the mainframe platform. It's tremendous fun, but it's also extremely relevant because in the end, it's going to ensure that all of the businesses out there that are leveraging the great benefits of the mainframe are going to be able to get skills for the mainframe going forward. They're going to continue to be able to run their business on the mainframe. They're going to be able to modernize the mainframe in place. So it's really important work that we do, but it's fun, and they actually pay us for it too, so we like that. So let's meet the panel in alphabetical order. Let's start with John.
Hi, my name's John Jakacki. I'm a principal software architect and site security champion with Broadcom, developing security products for the mainframe. I have 20 years of experience, more than 20 years experience in the industry at large, developing distributed systems with global partners around the world. And I've joined now the mainframe effort to help modernize applications on the mainframe, especially by enabling secure APIs, performing intelligent data analysis, and through applying the zero trust strategy to what we do in compliance. And I'm a passionate advocate for continuous learning and have worked as an instructor for lead developers and architects. And I also like to promote at events like this applied best practices, patterns and principles in software design and in cybersecurity.
Rose.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rose Sakach. I am, offering manager, product manager at Broadcom. I am an OMP, Open Mainframe Project ambassador. I'm a Zowe squad lead. I'm a member of the Zowe Technical Steering Committee and a member of the Zowe Advisory Council. So lots of Zowe going on in my world. Prior to becoming a product manager, I spent probably close to 25 years in the financial industry in various roles in mainframe, systems programming, operations, application development, what else? And also spent some time doing administrative work as a consultant, one of which was actually mainframe security.
Did you do the electrical wiring in the office also?
I did not. I did not electrically wire the office.
Len?
Thanks, Michael. Hello, everybody. My name is Len Santalucia. I'm the CTO for the mainframe practice at Converge Technologies. We were recently acquired by Converge just a couple years ago. We're known as Vicom Infinity, a converged company. This Vicom Infinity has been in the mainframe business since the early 90s. My background is I was with IBM since 1978 through 2008, and then I came to work for Vicom Infinity right after that, and I've been there ever since. Prior to IBM, just for a few years, I was the black sheep of my family because I'm from originally the Endicott, New York area. If anybody knows where that is, it's about 3.5, 4 hours west over the George Washington Bridge from here. That is the home of IBM, where IBM incorporated in 1924. And IBM has been in my family since 1936 with my grandfather and then my father and then me. But for those first few years when I got out of school from Binghamton University in '73, I went to work for a couple of mainframe competitors, but I was finally able to get in back right in 1978. So I technically have been with the mainframe. This will be my 50th year, and it's been just quite a ride and a great experience, and met a lot of nice people like this and get to work with them. And I'm also the chair of the governing board for the Linux Foundation Open Mainframe Project since its inception in 2015, so eight years. And that's also been quite an interesting ride and very enjoyable.
Well, congratulations on half a century.
Yeah, and thank you.
And I had a grandfather and an uncle who worked for IBM. There's no shame in that, right?
No, not at
Emre?
all.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emre Tunar. I am a director of software engineering at Broadcom, and in my current role as the division security champion, I'm responsible for defining and implementing strategy and processes and policies for secure software development for our entire mainframe product portfolio. Prior to that, I've led engineering organizations for mainframe modernization and security areas, same at Broadcom. And then I started my career actually on the distributed systems as an engineer back at Computer Associates, back when it was named Computer Associates, and worked on network and systems management, storage management products, and I was fortunate enough to move into mainframe about 13 years ago and have been on the mainframe side since then.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Tim.
Hey, thank you, Michael, and thanks everyone for attending. I'm Tim Willging. I'm a Rocket Fellow, and I've spent the majority of my roughly 30-year career developing commercial software for the mainframe at various different companies. Today at Rocket, I lead a team of principal architects and distinguished engineers that work across our mainframe portfolio. And more specifically, some teams I lead are contributing to the Zowe open source. We've also realized that there's a large number of open source packages that don't run natively on Z, so I lead a team of engineers that port that software to run on ZOS native. to provide that, and we upstream those changes out to the community to provide that, for the ZOS community as well. And happy to be here and discuss this topic.
Thank you. Happy to have you here. So the way I'd like this to work today is less of an interview style panel and more of I will direct questions to specific panelists, but I do expect you guys to chime in any way, any time, on any topic that you think you have something to say. Please do. Don't hesitate. I am going to kick off the discussion with you, though, Rose, because you called out the fact that you're a leader in the Zowe community, and from my experience, no exaggeration there, right? So Zowe has been very well adopted over the past year or two. In his 5-year history, we've seen that adoption growing pretty consistently. In fact, the last year, you could almost say it was exploding, right? Which makes me wonder, since Zowe is an open source project that was designed to interact with the mainframe, does that mean that those customers that are adopting Zowe don't have any concerns about open source and the mainframe?
Ooh, absolutely not. They absolutely do have concerns about security, particularly because Zowe is open source. But what we've learned is that a lot of those concerns tend to be speculative. And, there are quite a number of use cases that our customers are finding bring them a tremendous amount of value. And quite honestly, that helps to overcome any of the security concerns that they may have had.
So, and maybe I should target this at Emre. So you're a security champion at your company. So in your role, you define, communicate, and enforce policies that are designed to help us ensure that our customers are as safe as can possibly be, that our product teams are doing the things that they need to do to ensure that. So if you're doing your job and doing it well, which I'm sure you are, and your counterparts at other vendors are also doing their job well, and customers are following best practices, should there be any cause for concern?
Well, you're right, Mike. There shouldn't be any cause for concern if everybody is doing their job, right? The fact is there is a level of risk involved with any type of software you use on any platform, whether it's open source software, commercial software, or your own homegrown software. There are software weaknesses in all of them. Same applies to the platforms, whether you're running it on the cloud, you're running it on distributed systems, on-prem, or you're running it on the mainframe. It's not unique to open source, and it's not unique to mainframe. When you think about mainframes, actually, I would tend to say that mainframes are one of the most securable, if not the most securable platforms that's available. And the key word there is securable. The actual level of implemented security depends on what features you're taking advantage of. Have you turned on those security features and capabilities that are available and taking advantage of them? So same thinking applies to using open source on the mainframe. And it's on a collective responsibility for us as vendors and as customers to work together and take advantage of what's available. And by doing that, we can mitigate the risks that exist down to a level that's acceptable by everybody's organization's level of risk acceptance.
If you don't lock the front door of your house, your security system is worthless.
Exactly.
That's a good point. Out of everything that Emre said, believe it or not, I picked up on the fact that it's not unique to mainframe. The reason I grab onto that is because sitting right next to me here, John, you've got experience on a lot of other platforms and in the way they interact with mainframe as well. So that means that this conversation that we're having is a conversation you've heard before, and it's not necessarily about mainframe. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so what I recognize is that the mainframe is uniquely suited and relied upon for executing our most critical workloads and on our most sensitive data. And while we're going to discuss the clear benefits of open source to both vendors and to our customers alike, it's clear to us that security in a zero trust world is never a once and done proposition. And as we adopt modern, agile, shift left practices to govern that security on the system ongoing, open source becomes a very attractive part of the equation. And I think when we look at mainframe versus other platforms, any hesitancy there may really stem from wondering if there are systematic, reliable ways that we can actually capture all of those market advantages of open source while maintaining our non-negotiable essential security and even enhancing the resiliency of our applications in the system and increasing our customer trust, even when the landscape is completely dynamic and threats are ever changing. So we have a market in which change is accelerating, skills are evolving, and new threats emerge all the time. Do we have systematic answers for these challenges in a way that we can apply them to ensure a positive return on investment for open source in mainframe security? And today, I think we're going to demonstrate or discuss how vendors like Broadcom and critical infrastructure efforts like the Open Mainframe project, how we do just that. Following the mandates from governmental bodies like NIST and CISA and industry observers like OWASP and MITRE, guide us towards explicit practices that answer for these challenges in a way that helps keep that most securable platform secure, even as it grows to meet this accelerating, expanding business need.
Thank you. Len, 50 years. Is this a new discussion? Is this a new conversation about open source and mainframe and security?
It's the same thing all over again, over and over and over again. And, one of the things during that time, before I retired from IBM, I had the distinct pleasure of starting the Linux effort at IBM. IBM invested $1 billion in Linux in the 1999 timeframe. And they did it across their whole server family, mainframe, Power, and x86. And this Linux Impact team I was asked to start up was because of my affiliation over the years with Wall Street customers right here downtown. Many of the C-level executives that are there today, I was their SE when I was just starting out and when they were just starting out. And we all kind of grew together. And one day when I was tapped on the shoulder to go out and talk to them about this Linux and open source stuff on all of our servers, it became very obvious that one of the things they were worried about was all this security stuff and what's going to happen if a problem occurs and who's going to fix this and all. I said, don't worry about it. And he, how can you say that, Len? I said, this is from experience now. Many of the financial firms that are here today, there's a lot of younger people here. A lot of the guys like me from them are not here today. I think they're back there working so the youngsters can come here and frolic a little bit this today. But the thing that a couple of them actually experienced this, there was very early on a problem with a bind command on Linux open source on the mainframe. At some of these firms that experimented with proof of concepts with Linux. And what they did was they reported it. And within 1 hour across the world, not just in their operation, it was identified and the fix was provided across the world. ZOS and all the main operating systems on the mainframe couldn't do that if they wanted to. Okay? And that's because of the open source community, how watchful and careful it is with this kind of stuff. It's absolutely amazing, and it happens over and over and over again. And then when you run this stuff, Linux and open source, on the Z, it takes advantage of the underlying security capabilities and infrastructure and architecture that has been there for years. You know, the mainframe is going to be 60 years old next year. There is no architecture in the world with that track record. None. Okay? And all of those years, it kept getting better and better with the security stuff, and it allows Linux and the open source software to leverage those things that the traditional operating systems on the mainframe have been able to enjoy all these years. It is really the only operating environment that can say it can technically guarantee security. The other platforms can only say it, that they can do it operationally. Think of those two words, technically versus operationally, right? There's a very big distinction there. So it's an interesting journey it has.
So I'm going to latch on to that 1 hour response, which is awesome, but I'm going to hold that thought for a second because I wanted to ask Tim something. So legacy applications on the mainframe, for example, COBOL applications, millions of them running all over the place. Is there something about those applications that makes them inherently more secure than other modern applications that are interacting with the mainframe?
No, absolutely not. As has been previously set up here, those applications, even though they're 30 or 40 years old, are still subject to various attacks. There are some examples that I've seen in my career of COBOL, SQL, DB2 applications that have been vulnerable to SQL injections. It all comes down to the process that you deploy within your organization to secure those applications, to go through the penetration testing, to go through the process of securing, to make sure your firewalls are in place, to make sure your ZOS security through your enterprise security manager has been set up correctly. So again, I absolutely agree that ZOS and the mainframe is the most securable platform, but just because it's legacy, just because it has been running for 50 years, does not guarantee that it's inherently secure. Absolutely not true.
I had a feeling you might say that. Right? So going back to that 1 hour response, so if I understood it earlier today, in one of the earlier keynote, there was a security panel, and one of the panelists was talking about Log4j and the response to Log4j, and that some businesses took up to, I think he said, 6 months just to figure out where they were using it. And then other businesses, if I understood correctly, had dealt with it and responded to it within, I think, 4 days. Well, 4 days sounds great, except to me, as somebody who spent 4 decades on the mainframe, 4 days sounds like it could be an eternity with, the security of my business at risk. Does anybody else agree with that?
Oh yeah, I would say so, absolutely. The mainframe has a culture that's developed over many years of security, reliability, availability, and then sometimes that culture allows the platform to run that way by all the process that's been built around the mainframe. That's what we do as mainframers. Many of our customers' critical businesses are running there. So there is a culture that wants to do things at the right pace and the right tasks and the right process, but sometimes that culture actually ends up getting in the way of making that change at the right velocity. Yeah. And I think the mainframe world is changing in that world now, to where we are changing faster. The culture is changing, and we can deploy those types of change now quickly, like you say, and get them applied across all of our customers' businesses.
Going back to Emre, you mentioned some interesting points earlier about being aware of security risks, of being prepared, of responding quickly. right along the lines of the previous question. What advice in general would you give to the people out here or to our customers if they were listening to help them to be more aware, to be more prepared, to be able to respond quickly?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. You have to be prepared, right? We've seen, let's just look at the Log4j example, right? Pretty much all major mainframe vendors had at least some software that they shipped that was impacted by Log4j, and so it's on the ecosystem, it's in your systems, and we all need to be prepared. So the way I do it is I break it down into 4 steps, right? First step is, as we alluded to, you need to understand, you need to be aware of where it is and what it is. So you need to be able to inventory and be able to track that inventory on an ongoing basis of where and what open source exists on your systems. It could be open source software that you've installed directly. It could be open source that's embedded in the vendor software that you buy from vendors like us up here. Or it could be open source software that your own internal development teams are using, and including in your homegrown solutions. So again, that first step is to be able to understand that. And there are tools that are available today that can help you with that. And there's actually evolving standards that was touched on earlier today, like SBOMs. Hopefully we get to talk about it in this discussion as well. That will even make it easier and better, right? So that's the first step. You need to know and understand before you can even do something about it, right? So that's a prereq. The second step is to be able to monitor for new vulnerabilities that are getting disclosed against that software. So you need to be able to do that correlation. And again, there are both open source and commercial tools that are available that can enable you to do that effectively today. And the third step is to be able to monitor for security fixes, both from the open source community as well as from your software vendors. So you need to understand, how does your software vendor relay security updates, right? Do they have email subscriptions you can subscribe to? Do they have a metadata that they publish? So for example, at Broadcom, we provide both email notifications for security fixes we provide, as well as we provide a periodically updated metadata for all of our security fixes, so our customers can download that, process it on a periodic basis, and see which ones are new. And then the last but not the least important, definitely probably the most important step, is to enhance your software maintenance process. You touched on it earlier, that we need to continue evolving how we apply software on the mainframe. If you rewind back probably to 15, 20 years ago, some of the customers may be updating their mainframe systems once, maybe twice a year, right? That's not feasible anymore, right? We need to be moving at a faster pace. So it's important to implement a risk-based, threat-based, periodic maintenance for your security fixes. So you need to be able to understand what's the risk level or security threat level for a specific vulnerability and a security fix, and be able to apply that at the right frequency for your business to mitigate that risk down to a level, again, that's acceptable for your organization.
Go ahead, Rose. Or Tim. Oh, ladies
Okay,
first.
sorry.
Rose, yeah.
So here's I feel a couple of benefits with Zowe. Being so young, right? 5-year anniversary, 2018 introduced. The benefit is that Zowe began its journey incorporating those tenets that you just described, Emre. And, you know, when you think about open source being open source, thinking that, oh my goodness, I don't have a vendor necessarily behind that, that's the good news. Everything that we do is transparent. So if you're interested in whether or not we adhere to any of these policies, you can find that out very easily. Much more easily, I would say, than you might be able to determine whether or not your favorite vendor is following those policies. They probably are, but the transparency isn't necessarily there. And as you had indicated, mainframe being, old and some of the other characteristics, again, Zowe being 5 years young, had the advantage of knowing that these policies were in place and adopting these policies and practices.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to add one more. You need to make sure you're obtaining that open source from
Reliable resources.
Resources that your company has vetted, and you need to have the right controls in place to make sure your employees are only getting the software from those locations. That's a big one. And again, I'll go back to the mainframe culture because I've been in it so long. Many companies for years said that their mainframe can only have software delivery from either IBM or a major vendor. But the breadth of open source and the power and the modernization and the new capabilities that it brings to your mainframe led many of our customers to say, well, we need to go get that software from somewhere now. So that created a culture problem for some of our mainframe customers, saying, well, we never really let anything touch my mainframe that didn't come from one of these vendors. So make sure you're getting your open source. If your company and regulations require that you get support for that open source, if you're going to be running on production, you can get that from Broadcom, you can get that from Rocket. We're providing that for our customers, so we give you the support that you require. We provide secure delivery of that open source through some of our programs so that the channel of delivering it is secure. So all of these things together help you run open source more reliably on your mainframes.
Emre, just a side note here, and there's no question in this, but so the fact that our mainframe businesses are managing much more complex environments than ever before, much more than the 15 or 20 years ago that you were talking about, and that they're often doing it with fewer people than they ever had to do it before. It means for them to step up their maintenance practices like you say they need to do, they're going to also need to have better automation, better practices, better tools in place. And we'll probably come back to this when we talk about why open source on mainframe matters. But first I want to ask this is a question I've been dying to ask you guys. And it may start a debate, or maybe you'll just all agree, but I've always wanted to know the answer. There's two schools of thought here, right? Open source, everyone can see it, right? There's bad actors and there's good actors. Everyone can see it. Doesn't that mean everyone can hack it? On the other side of it, people say, well, everyone can see it. That means everyone can protect it. Which do you subscribe to? John, yeah, you want to start?
Yeah, this is like my favorite question. So it allows me to hit upon one of the lesser acknowledged or talked about qualities or benefits of open source. And that is the inherent security that's afforded by the principle of open design. So when you have a broad community of developers and cybersecurity savvy consumers who are building, utilizing, and inspecting that code base, and sometimes even formally auditing that code, fewer bugs can exist because vulnerabilities are more quickly discovered and addressed by so many ethical contributors. But especially for large, widely adopted components, there even exists a natural, let's call it evolutionary pressure for those components to be secure by design. And what that means in the open design strategy is that they must be secure even when the implementation of that component is known to an attacker. And in a zero trust world where, let's face it, zero-day AI and even insider threats exist, we have to have strategies in place that make our systems secure, even in the face of expert know-how, that present a multifaceted defense in depth, and that even expect the unexpected breach, and know how to perform incident detection and analysis that allows us to respond quickly and precisely. This is an inherently more secure strategy than simply secrets or mere security by obscurity. And we need to have that kind of application in our current landscape where threats are ever changing and emerging.
Anybody else have an opinion?
I just say, look at the success of open source around the world, and I think it's pretty, pretty evident. It's running commercially in all of our financial institutions. It's running in much of the backbone of our government, and just by that alone, I think it proves that it can be secure and is secure and open. I really do like what was just said, that having the code out there for everyone's inspection, having a community that's looking, a vast community that's looking over open source, ensuring that that it's at least the more popular packages and deployed packages, making sure that it's secure, and then the whole system that's been developed for telling the community about those vulnerabilities. It really is quite amazing how quickly those become known, and then the system for tracking and those changes, it's all out in the open for us to see. And typically with closed source, there are business factors that come into play as whether or not a company might disclose that issue or not. So there are other financial things at play that might get in the way of delivering a fix, timely, but open source doesn't suffer from that because it's all out in the open.
I think, Len, you were next. I see everybody's got their mic raised on this one. I knew that was going to happen. Go ahead, Len.
The system is a meritocracy, right?
Yeah.
Only the stuff gets in there that people allow in the open source. That's really the thing that is, what other better governance than that can you have? Nothing.
That's true.
And I think there has been a shift in the mindset of the open source community as well, to continue to shift left on how we approach security. John touched on secure by design, right? If you look at the Log4j vulnerability, it wasn't, someone said it earlier today, it wasn't actually a bug. It was a chain of features that had some weaknesses that led to an exploitation. So those are lessons learned that the community is applying and taking a larger stance at, shifting left on how we approach security, from all the way from the design to implementation and post implementation.
Emre, the mindset that needed to change wasn't the open source community mindset. It was the non-open source community mindset and now that it is changing, it's opening up a lot to open source. That's really what's been, but it took a little while for us to all get there, and it's still not perfect, but it's a lot better than I saw in 1999, 2000, when we were first coming out with all this stuff.
Would you say that was the mainframe mindset? Pretty much the mainframe mindset versus the open source mindset?
No.
No?
No.
That's
I think it was across all platforms.
Okay.
Heavily with the mainframe, but it was across all platforms, really.
I know, Mike, that within the Zowe security group, we went through this exact debate. How soon do we notify our consumers about vulnerabilities? There's that, the sooner you notify, it seems the more vulnerable you become, because your community consists, your consumer base conceivably could consist of attackers. And where do you draw that line? And we just, again, we follow best practices. And with our security work group, we have policies and procedures that align with industry policies and procedures that indicate, when we're aware of a vulnerability, if it's our own vulnerability, we now have, is it CVE? We have CVE publishing
CVEs, yeah.
capabilities now, so that we can introduce it into the standard database of vulnerabilities. We can then resolve it and notify our consumers who have opted in to early notification. So, I mean, it's something that we recognized and discussed and actually debated, that those pluses and minuses, realizing that, you know, we have to walk that fine line similar to all of the vendors. But again, our policies and our procedures are out there for all of you to examine.
And as an open source consumer, those are the types of critical criteria we use to determine whether to select for an open source component. As you know, we want to know that there's evidence that it's made secure, continually governed in terms of security, that there's ways to report findings, and that the community maintaining that repository reacts. So that's critical to consumers as well.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the selection criteria we should all go through when we're looking at deploying open source within our critical business systems. How many contributors are there? What's the deployment like? I think there's also a performance profile, when running on the mainframe. Is it actually fit within the architecture of what I need? Is it best deployed there, or is it best deployed close to my mainframe? A lot of things you should go through as you're evaluating open source for use within your critical business infrastructure.
Exhausted all the opinions on that? I could have thrown that one question out. I knew it was going to be the most interesting one. Len, all those years, this is a Finos event, so all those years, you've got to have a lot of experience in the financial sector, dealing with customers there. What's the adoption of open source look like in financial institutions, and what's the track record there?
It's been pretty good. It had a rough start in the beginning, when it became kind of official with that investment that IBM announced that they were making with all the, with Red Hat and Novell, which is now SUSE, you remember, and Ubuntu and all the rest of them. And but I would say as of the last 7 or so years, I think it has become more heavily adopted in the mainframe world than ever before. And there's a lot of things in the ZOS environment itself that has that open source integrated in it. And as much as, and then with the catching of now of like, the Red Hat OpenShift and the containers and the ability that you can have with this on the mainframe alongside of their clouds and their distributed clustered systems within their organizations. There's not really much worry now about that because it's just become so prevalent. And I think it's only accelerate even from where it is right now.
Rose, for Zowe specifically, we've seen all that adoption we talked about earlier, financial institutions as well, included in that?
Yes. Financial institutions are big players in the Zowe world, yes. And I think I'd like to say that they're understanding the capabilities and the architectural, genius of the API mediation layer when it comes to ensuring that the ZOS services that all of our consumers are accessing or plan to access via Zowe are protected. The API mediation layer was designed with zero trust in mind. And, zero trust is an interesting concept. When I first learned of it, I said, zero trust? What is zero trust? And essentially it means never trust, and I thought to myself, so we trusted? At one point, we trusted. But the API mediation layer was designed with zero trust in mind, limiting the access into the mainframe, regardless of the number of services. That mediation layer serves as your single point of access, single point of control, if you will, the security manager, the security master of all of those APIs, supporting just about any security protocol out there. Additionally, what you may or may not realize is that behind the mediation layer still stands that rock-solid security, all those rock-solid mainframe security access managers that have been on the mainframe since its inception, right? And that hasn't changed. You may get in the door, but you may not have access to anything because those security controls are still in play.
Yeah, a testament to that is that many of the software vendors are not embedding Zowe, but they're having Zowe as a prereq for commercial solutions. So IBM's doing this, Rocket's doing this, Broadcom's doing this, where Zowe is in the prereq stack that you need to go and deploy throughout your organization, and then the commercial software you buy from us actually depends upon Zowe being in that stack. So we all trust it as vendors. We're all investing in that trust as vendors. We have a vested interest in the community, trusting Zowe, and so I think there's a good foundation that's been built on there.
Any other opinions or stories, or anybody else have anything interesting to add on financial sector before I move on?
I was just going to add, you touched on zero trust, and it's a relatively new term and concept that's been out there. But actually, if you think back, zero trust is at the core of how mainframe operates from the very beginning. On the mainframe, unless you explicitly grant access to a specific resource, you don't have access to it, which is zero trust. It's true.
You know, it's funny how all these new names come out, you know. And when did the first cloud come out? Does anybody remember?
Like 10, 12 years ago, maybe.
60?
15.
April 7, 1964.
Wow. There you go.
I was going to say Salzer and Schroeder called that, fail-safe defaults, right? So,
It's funny, all these new names are really just renames.
Well, and the other side of the coin, too, I'm speaking from, my application development days. Zero trust today means you're making my life more difficult, right? That's the other side of the story, right? Tokens expire, passwords expire, and now I don't have access to all of the resources I need access to. But that's the world in which we live.
Sure, where is that pendulum? How much you're going to put inconvenience in the way of security? And certainly it's swung back and forth a few times in the history, but now I think we've learned our lesson on that, and more technologies are coming in place to make that the friction less, but still provide more security.
It is the tenet of zero trust. If you can't trust anybody, then you have to limit the attack time and their ability to cause any kind of damage.
Think of it this way, a security breach is the worst inconvenience.
Right, that's right.
All right, in the interest of time, let's move on to why it matters. Why not just tell customers if they're not comfortable with open source on mainframe, then walk away from it? I think, John, you might have said to me earlier today, don't ask me any hard questions. So I'm going to start with you on this one. So you work on a security team. How does open source technology enable developers on the mainframe? How does it enable them to focus on core competencies, especially on a platform so known for its security and how important it is? And I heard earlier today in one of the other sessions that maybe some people think of open source just as a cost savings for vendors. So, share some thoughts on, why is it important?
I could spend a lot of time enumerating on that.
We have 11 minutes left.
I'm going to make it really, really quick. So first, I'm going to acknowledge that it's cost effective, right? But when we say that, I don't just mean that permissive licenses sometimes make it, zero cost for us to adopt a component. But I also mean that we realize this really significant time savings when our mainframe experts don't have to develop commodity and infrastructure code from the ground up, right? There's a web server community developing common components around certain things that they have core competencies to develop, and we're able to leverage that. So that brings us to a second benefit, which is we're enabled, both our new and existing mainframe experts can focus their energies on our critical core competencies, the mainframe, the security aspect of the mainframe, and delivering those differentiating market values to our customers. And they can, do that with an agility and a time to market that can delight our customers and actually strengthen our relationships. And if you look at all of that, there's kind of one other hidden benefit there, I'll call it 4, which is that when you utilize available open source components this way, they tend to separate concerns, which allows developers with differing skill sets to be able to construct their environments in such a way that they can use the languages familiar to them, the tech stacks they're bringing to the table, and the modern tools that allows mainframe to attract the top talent in cybersecurity and allows us to ensure the vitality of our community of cybersecurity experts both now and in a way that's adaptive into a future that we haven't even arrived at yet.
Yeah, I just want to dovetail into that for a moment. How many of you have contributed or participated in an open source project? Any of you? Several of you. Okay, then this comes as no surprise to you. Folks who participate in open source projects are highly motivated, competent, responsible, excited individuals that want to be there. They are so passionate about their technology and their contributions. I don't know how it can get any more, I don't know how you can get any more quality beyond that. And that speaks to what you had said as far as...
100% agree.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll sum it up and say it's absolutely required for platform preservation. I just absolutely believe this. I'm 100% sold on the fact that open source provides modernization, it provides familiarity, as we were just saying, to that next generation. It provides innovation that runs on the mainframe. IBM is porting open source to run on the mainframe. A lot of us vendors are porting open source to run on the mainframe. It is imperative for platform preservation that open source is there for our communities to use, to make it more familiar, to make it more powerful, and to make it, a platform that can be viable for the next 30 years, which I, again, believe it's going to be, no doubt in my mind, because we're doing this as a community and as a group of vendors.
Yeah.
And I was going to add, and this probably spills into the next topic, but you started with saying that it's free, right? It's available for free as a cost savings, right? I think that's a big misconception because it's not free. There is a responsibility that comes beyond the point of selecting to use that software, right? As a vendor, for example, we should be responsible for keeping hygiene and maintaining that, right? Continuously evaluating, is this open source software that I'm using still supported by an active community? Or maybe it's not anymore. And if a new vulnerability comes up, how am I going to deal with it, right? And be able to continuously monitor for new vulnerabilities and be able to turn around and supply security fixes to your customers to build that trust in the ecosystem.
And doing that kind of monitoring in a responsible way, even when there aren't direct impacts to the software, right? So, you may watch a component and at the time of selection, it may pass your criteria. Maybe support of it falls off. Maybe its track record with reported vulnerabilities starts to increase. Even if you don't need a security integrity fix from us because maybe it's not exploitable in the context of one of our applications, that reputation is still something that we monitor, plan ahead for, and take proactive measures. Even as that software is sitting on your system in deployment and in the runtime, we're kind of partnering with you to do this behind the scenes work of watching the health of that application and keeping ahead of the situation.
So I'm trying to patch together pieces of the puzzle that I've been hearing all day and from this panel. Sounds to me as though open source and mainframe, it's not going to be long before it's well accepted, well adopted, part of the fabric of the platform. So with that being the case, I'll direct this at Emre as a security champion. What advances do you see being necessary in the future in the way we do things and in the way we deliver things to help our customers to be prepared for for that reality?
Yeah. So let me start with saying very, very clearly that there is already existing set of standards, tools, capabilities on the platform today that enables you to manage the risks of using open source software today. Right? That already exists. But as we move along the journey of maturity, right, we're learning and figuring out better and more efficient and more effective ways of doing things, right? So it will even get better and better as we go forward. So one of the emerging standards that was touched on earlier is SBOMs, or Software Bill of Materials. This is stemming from some of the regulations like the U.S. Executive Order from a couple of years ago on improving the nation's cybersecurity. The intent of Software Bill of Materials is to allow customers to have visibility into what's in the software that they're buying from the vendors, right? So we would supply a bill of materials, essentially an ingredient list of what open source software is in a specific product. That will make that, remember that first step I mentioned? Be aware and understand what's in on your systems. This would make that first step much easier than it is today, right?
So you said you talked about state today, how it is today. Let me ask John a question now. What are vendors doing today to partner with their customers to ensure that they can continuously monitor the software that's deployed already on their systems?
Yeah, so I touched on it a little bit to mention the kind of work we do looking at the health of the projects that might produce open source components that are supplied in part of our solution. But we are monitoring for more than that, right? So we're continuously looking at software in deployment using modern automations, right? So this is not just through convention or hunt and peck kind of, conventional knowledge, but rather it's empowered by policy as code. And we're enabled to look at basically three aspects. One, we consider ongoing the license compliance for all of the elements in our solutions to ensure that valuable intellectual property and customer extensions are protected. We're looking, as we've mentioned, at the operational risks for components that maybe fall out of service or that start to have a community that doesn't look like they're supporting it, or that starts to have a track record that's different from what it looked like at the beginning. So governance over time is a key element, right? And then, of course, we're looking for any newly publicized vulnerabilities that are not just known to the vendor, but known to the entire software development community at large, as reflected in the National Vulnerability Database and other knowledge bases that our tools can pick up on and make us aware of, so that we can immediately triage that in the context of what's running on your systems, decide the severity of that, and if there's already a mitigation for it, or if a fix is necessary.
We have 2 minutes left. Any last thoughts before we end today?
Just one,
Yeah.
from me anyway. When I listen to all of my colleagues here speak to this, open source gives you something that we all have been trying to do for a long time. You could run it anywhere you want, right? So if you happen to be like a lot of the large financial firms are, where they have one of everything in the way of a platform, run it everywhere and see where it performs and works the best. And 9 times out of 10, I think you might see that the mainframe is probably one of the best places, if not the best, to run open source from a security, integrity, availability, reliability, performance perspective.
It reminds me of a quote that one of my colleagues used to have at the bottom of their email signature. And the quote goes something like this: "None of us is as smart as all of us." Open source gives us the ability to leverage the intelligence and expertise of all of us.
Excellent. Last thoughts? No? All right, well, listen, guys, you guys are brilliant, and you were amazing today, and I'm honored to be in your presence, and I thank you so much for your time and your contributions. I thank everybody for attending today. I learned a lot. I hope everybody else has learned a lot, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Mike, you want?
There's a question. Sure.
So if I'm an orthodox COBOL programmer and I would like to basically graduate into becoming an open source code programmer on the mainframe, what do I need to do?
So to repeat the question, he's a COBOL programmer, and if he's interested in becoming an open source programmer on mainframe, what would he need to do? Who's gonna take this one?
Find an open source project that you're interested in with a language that you want to learn or have some proficiency in. Get involved into the project through Slack or that community, however they're operating, and dive right in.
And join the Open Mainframe project.
Yeah, Open Mainframe project
has a COBOL programming course. You may consider teaching. Yes,
Or contributing.
or contributing.
Thank you for the question. Any others before I shut down?
0.
All right, we hit 0.
We hit the buzzer. Thank you.